So back to saying welcome. It's great to see you here today. It is really wonderful. On behalf of Green Newton and Newton Conservators, welcome to the Environmental Mayoral Forum. I'd like to welcome candidates Scott Lennon and Ruth Ann Fuller. We are delighted to have them here today. Thank you very much for coming. We are also happy to see students in the audience and a teacher from Newton North, as well as professor from here at LaSalle, and we really love interacting with students and teachers, so thank you for being here. I'm going to set a little bit of the process. First, there will be, each candidate will answer 5 questions from each of the organization. Sorry.
If everyone would turn off your cell phones, please.
Yeah, including me. Thank you, Marcia. President of Green Newton. Each candidate is going to answer 5 questions from each organization, alternating between the 2 organizations. They will each have 3 minutes for each question. Wonderful intern Armando, who's the head of the Environment Club, will be over there with the time to let them know. And at the end of the prepared questions, there will be time for audience questions. This is an environmental forum, and we ask, please, that all of your questions relate to the environment, not to general political things. So we'll have to stop questions if they're not connected to the environment, please. At this point, I would like to introduce the moderator for today. We're really thrilled to have John Regeson here. John is I always get the name wrong. He's the chief conservation scientist for the Endangered Species Program at the Mass Division of Wildlife. He's also a former member and now a current advisor on the Newton Conservators Board. He's helping us with work at Woodcock Meadow, and it's really wonderful. And he was the founding president of the Newton Community Farm. At this point, without any further ado, I'd like to turn it over to John so you can hear the candidates sooner. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay? For those of you that don't know me, my name is Scott Lennon. I am a candidate for mayor. I'd like to welcome everybody here this afternoon. I really appreciate taking a little time to learn a little bit more about me, a little bit more about my candidacy, and talk about issues of environment that are obviously very important to all of us. I just did want to take 2 seconds to say I am a lifelong resident, 3rd generation Newtonian, and I think that protecting the environment will be one of my top priorities as mayor. And I am doing that because of the protection for future generations. I have a young little girl. She's in the 1st grade at the Lincoln Elliott School. She will be the 4th generation of our family to graduate from the Newton Public Schools. And now is the time to do something in terms of planning for her and planning for other future generations. So as I said, protecting our environment will be one of my top priorities as mayor. And it's for 3 main reasons. 1, I want to do whatever I can to protect and enhance our environment because that's what makes our city so wonderful and so livable. I want to make sure that Newton is the garden city of the 21st century, whether it's reducing greenhouse gas emissions, preserving open space, moving towards 100% renewable energy, fixing the darn gas leaks, decreasing waste, or simply reversing the loss of our tree canopy. We need to take local action now, more than ever, because it is very clear and very apparent we will not be getting any assistance from the national level or even a little bit at the state level. Secondly, as I mentioned, I want to leave my daughter Jenna and all of our children with a greener and healthier community. I want them to remember us as parents that worked hard to be part of the solution and not the problem. As mayor, I will work tirelessly on behalf of our environment for the benefit of all of our children. And finally, in Newton, protecting the environment is about being a leader and a role model for other communities. As Amy Sangiolo said in our first environmental forum, we need to be bold. I want to be remembered as someone who had the courage and the commitment and the vision to lead us on the environment. I look forward to working with all of you to accomplish that. Thank you.
I'm Ruth Ann Fuller, and it's so good to be with you today. We are facing a crisis. You don't have to look even to the fires in California or the hurricanes down south. All you have to do is look at the thermometer today. We're reaching 73 degrees on October 21st. Combined with that, we have a president in Washington, D.C. who is dismantling the EPA and withdrawing us from the Paris Accords. The time for cities to act and to lead is right now. And you know what? Newton should be a leader. We have the financial resources more than most cities and towns. In this room, we have deep expertise. Look at the person I'm sitting next to. We have citizens who are passionate and energized and very well organized. Just think of Mothers Out Front to Green Newton to 350 Mass. Also, SETI has put us in a really good place to move forward. Think about who's working at City Hall. I won't name them all, but from Ann Berwick to Jennifer Steele to Bill Ferguson. But we have work to do and ways to go, and other cities and towns are ahead of us. Look next door to Brookline with their green municipal aggregation program, to Cambridge's net zero plan, to Boston's third climate action plan. So together, all of us here and at City Hall need to work together and to lead. And I will be your leader. I have the passion, the vision, the experience to deliver. I know, whoops, I'm sorry. Push the bottom and I will go check with the folks here to see if we can
Stand up and I'll try to talk loud. That one just died on us, so sorry, you may have to.
Testing.
Oh, there we go.
Thank you. I know how to plan for the midterm and the long term and create milestones and metrics, but I also know how to get action right now. We don't have time to wait to plan. And you know what else the mayor needs is courage. Just this past week, the chair of finance chartered a well-crafted, important, bold building design and construction sustainability guidelines. I have shown that courage here in the city council before. I will continue to do so as mayor. We're going to get into specific policies during the Q&A, but let me just tell you, I have the experience doing this. Our water, sewer, stormwater situation, when I came into office 8 years ago, it was a hairy, complex situation. We didn't have any plans. Working with the Department of Utilities and City Councilor Deb Crossley, sorry, my time's up, we leaned in and got a real plan that's been put into action right now.
Okay, now we're ready for the first question, which will go to Councilor Lennon. And this is from Green Newton. I'll read it. I know. I figured that out. I'll read it again. 135 mayors have committed to 100% renewable energy to end dependence on fossil fuels. And the U.S. Conference of Mayors unanimously approved a bipartisan resolution to support a goal of 100% clean and renewable energy in cities nationwide by 2035. As mayor of Newton, how would you commit to an ambitious goal of 100% renewable residential, municipal, and business energy by a certain date, given inevitable future uncertainties, as 135 other mayors have done?
Thank you, John. I do understand the resolution that had been put forward. It was supported by a number of other mayors. And I also understand the many, many needs of our community and those cost implications. And you're asking me to commit to a goal of 100% renewable energy. We need to take a stand for future generations right now. And I want to be very clear. We need to take this step. And I am prepared to commit to these goals for electric, heat, and transportation. We need to be thoughtful, strategic, and realistic. But having somewhere to set your sights is extremely important. I'm always hesitant about setting dates, But I will commit to these goals and be consistently clear on where we are and how we can potentially achieve them. We want to move to 100% renewable energy as quickly as we can, and I support this goal of 100% for all sectors. We will work collaboratively on residential and small, large businesses in our institutions' timelines, with leading by example, with the incorporation also of these goals in our zoning. Strong education with regard to this on these benefits is for our city and for our society. We will continue to maximize our solar programs. We will look at the purchase of Class 1 RECs. We will continue and move further to move our fleet towards electric and definitely reduce our dependence on fossil fuels and commit to electric heat. But I want it to be clear that I want to commit to the 100% renewable energy plan. Thank you.
I too am committed to being ambitious and to having ambitious goals. But did you listen to the question? It didn't say, would you commit to the goal? It said, will you explain the process for deciding how to commit to the goal? And here's what we have to understand. Yes, the U.S. Conference of Mayors has the goal of 2035 for 100% renewable. But do you know our mayor, Seti Warren, has also committed already to the Metropolitan Mayors Coalition for 2050 to be a net zero? And then we've had 3 city councilors come in with an ambitious set of goals for conversion to electricity and renewable energy with a whole series of goals. Here's what I'm going to commit to: the hard work of figuring out what the ambitious goal is that we should set for Newton. We have to do that together. We actually don't know what the right date is, because we have to figure out what we need to do in the next 30, 40 years. Thank you, Anna. Break it down into 3-year increments with 1-year individual plans on the way. So I know how to do strategic planning and to make sure that we actually get the work done. So, and I'm not afraid to roll up my sleeves and get the hard work done. I'm committed to leveraging our resources, assigning the staff, and working with you and other talented citizens to create a plan that shows us exactly how to get to 100% renewable. Also, it's not enough to just set a goal. Mayor Warren set a goal that we would reduce municipal energy use 20% over 5 years and have that done by 2020. We're only 9% of the way there. So setting the goal is important. What's more important is figuring out and how to do the work and being ambitious. I'm grateful to all of you who are creating that ambition here. I share your passion, I share your fervor, and I will help us reach an ambitious goal that all of us agree on.
The next question is from the Newton Conservators, and we'll start with Councilor Fuller. Last year, Boston College purchased a 22-acre property on Hammond Pond Parkway. The rear portion of the property abuts Webster Conservation Area and DCR's Hammond Pond Reservation. Together, they form the largest contiguous forest in Newton. The land bought by BC contains popular trails, a beautiful vernal pool, and a wonderful diversity of plants and other wildlife. What is your plan for saving Webster Woods?
Thank you. Open space is critical to our lives here in Newton, and Webster Woods in particular is critical. And it's critical not just to those who live close by, which I happen to, but for residents all through Newton for environmental reasons, recreational, educational, and health. And I am passionate and committed to making sure that Webster Woods is preserved. And as city councilor, I've already been a leader in making that happen. And as mayor, that will be a top priority. The portion that BC owns is directly in between conservation land to the right and the left. We have to own it. Open space doesn't come up that often, so it's particularly important to do it. And I won't wait till my inauguration. When I'm elected, I hope, on November 7th, and yes, I do ask for your vote. Right after that, I'm planning on meeting with the president, Father Leahy of Boston College, and we're going to get this process going. And yes, I'll start by negotiating with BC for permanent protection and public access. At a minimum, the woods in the back, but I'm dedicated to getting that satellite parking area as well. And I'll submit approvals to the CPA and the City Council within 6 months of being in office. And by the first year, my first CIP, those monies are going to be on our CIP. I also pledge the more important thing. I pledge to use eminent domain if necessary, and to follow that up by imposing an enforceable, perpetual conservation restriction on this land. That's what this land means to the city of Newton. Open space is essential. This particular parcel is open space. And let's use the Webster Woods situation as a role model for preserving additional parcels of open space. We have to keep doing this going forward.
Thank you very much. Well, I appreciate the question, and I am absolutely committed to preserving Webster Woods, saving Webster Woods. It's been an opportunity that has been missed by the city twice, and it hasn't gone unnoticed. So there were two things that we were asked about this property with regard for the Friends of Webster Woods and from the conservators. And I am going to stick by what I wrote to both of those organizations, and I want to make sure that it's very clear here today, that I will make that a top priority of the city to protect this, to permanently protect this area. That I will certainly put together a citizens advisory group to meet on a quarterly basis that I will personally meet with. Within 2 years of taking office, I will negotiate that agreement with Boston College as someone who has experience in negotiations professionally for over 20 years in their job. Within 2.5 years, they've asked that we submit the necessary approvals to the CPA committee and the city council. If we could do that more aggressively with a good negotiation, it will absolutely do that, and it will absolutely be quicker. And despite my best efforts as someone who has that experience, that we cannot forge an agreement, I am prepared to support taking by eminent domain the area that is very important to everyone. I am not going to back down on that. Many people have said to me, I've gone door to door, I see the Save Webster Woods signs. They've asked me specifically about that. I am making that commitment here today. I want to be clear that anyone that walks out of this building does understand that. I feel very strongly about some of the points that the conservatives have put forward about the preservation of the Bear Pond and incorporating the parking lot into that plan. I had a great opportunity to tour that, and I had a great opportunity to go there on my own as well. And I do believe it's such an important resource here in the city of Newton, not many that are left that we need to take advantage of. I am going to grant the conservatives a role in administering the conservation restrictions, and I'm going to work with all stakeholders to work on a master plan with the DCR and our city's Director of Transportation to look how the acquisition of that parking and all of the access issues work here in the city of Newton. I am committed to this, and I am a man of integrity, and when I put my name behind something, I move forward on it. And I want everybody to be clear about that here today. Thank you.
The next question comes from Green Newton. In a city-managed, community-wide contract of aggregated energy, we can provide a default level of clean electricity that is higher than the 12% Class 1 locally sourced renewable energy the state currently requires utilities to provide. Brookline launched their aggregation contract this past summer with 37% of Class 1 renewable energy as their default number. Higher levels of clean energy would add a few dollars to people's monthly electric bill. The contract would, of course, allow opt-out and opt-in options. As Mayor of Newton, are you prepared to make Newton a leader and a model for renewable energy with a significant commitment to Class 1 electricity in an aggregation contract? Would that number be higher than Brookline's current 37%? And we'll start with Councilor Lennon.
Thank you, John. A couple of questions in there, and I want to be extremely direct about where I am. Would I support, would I be prepared to make Newton a leader in renewable energy's Class 1 aggregation contract? Yes, definitely. And as mayor, I will work to make Newton a model in at least 2 ways, well, maybe 3. I will work to ensure that we have the most robust and successful education campaign in Massachusetts around aggregations and why we get as many residents to possibly voluntarily subscribe to up to 100% renewable. And I can pledge that my family will be one of the first to sign up. I will require the consultants to also provide personal service to anyone who needs to be part of the opt-out program. You also asked about would that number be higher than Brookline's current 37%. I support a default rate that will at least be equal to Brookline's, bringing Newton to 37% Class 1 renewable energy as soon as possible. The key question from what I understand is how do you pick that right level of green energy that people would receive unless they opt out? We have to try to balance that. But I propose that after the initial 2-year contract, we consider raising the rates by 5% each year until we get to 100% by 2030. And that allows opt-out opportunities, obviously, at each increase, and the default rate may increase as well. We need to proceed gradually and protect those who can't afford the price increases. The opt-out works for some, but works for some, and some of those that can't afford it. And we need to just make sure that that is also an educational opportunity for folks to understand it. But I am committed to at least that default rate equal to Brookline, maybe even stronger. Thank you.
Energy aggregation is the least expensive and most efficient way to achieve the most important goal in front of us, which is to lower our emissions of greenhouse gases. So yes, I will be a leader, and together, all of us, we will make Newton a leader on aggregation of energy. And you know, one of the reasons I'm so passionate about becoming mayor is because of the role of the mayor in this process. The mayor has the sole authority to choose the default rate. What a magnificent sense of responsibility. So here's what we have to do, and I will lead on this.
Sorry.
What we have to do right now is start today with the education program. First as a citizen, as a city councilor, then as mayor-elect, then as mayor, will be an advocate and an educator so that in the coming months we can explain what for many is a complicated choice, Newton Power choice, and convince people early on that we need an ambitious default rate. The reason that's so important is because the mayor has to choose a default rate that doesn't scare people away, that gets them excited about being aggressive, not just matching Brookline, but we hope to beat Brookline. The other part of the role, though, is to convince our residents not to settle for, let's say, 40 or 50 or 52%, but to opt up to the 100%. That's our real goal. So we've got lots of work to do. Count on me being your ally. The other thing that I wanted to think about, though, is something that no other city or town has done yet, which is to figure out whether we also need an opt-down rate for those on really tight budgets and have low incomes and can't afford that 40 or 50% rate. Also, yes, we do have to make it clear that people can opt out so that there are no angry customers here in Newton. Finally, we can't just stop with this. We have to lobby the state, and as mayor I will, to increase its cap on renewables because solar is ready to take off. So let's work here in Newton, let's work down at the State House. As mayor, I'll do both.
Thank you. The next question comes from the Newton Conservators. Will you commit to granting to the Newton Conservators or another suitable organization permanent conservation restrictions on all Newton parks and conservation areas to prevent their future development?
Thank you. As mayor, I know we need additional legal safeguards ensuring open space stays that way in perpetuity. Like probably many of you, I actually had thought until fairly recently that Article 97 protected these properties. Turns out I was wrong. There's two threats. First, Article 97 only protects property that's deeded here in Newton as conservation or recreation land. We have a bunch of properties that isn't necessarily true for. And then more importantly, out in the Berkshires, Article 97 is being challenged in court. So I commit to granting the Newton Conservators, or if necessary, another suitable organization, permanent conservation restrictions on all our conservation lands to prevent their future development. And I'm committed to looking at our parklands as well. Many of you know I was deeply involved in the Ahern Service and Cabot projects. In Ahern, it all worked out kind of easily. We took a small part of the parkland for shared parking, but it didn't go that way at Cabot. Initially, the design came in with taking a significant portion of land for the parking. That wasn't right. That isn't good. So let's go through those Parks and Rec pieces one by one and figure out conservation restrictions that work for them. And let's also, by the way, just start by making sure we catalog and identify all the properties that have conservation restrictions. We've got it pretty well figured out, but we need to figure out the rest of the list. And then beyond the conservation restrictions, we have to invest in the staffing to monitor the CRs and have the funding to maintain the properties. There's another interesting related point though. You know what we also have to do? We have to look at our zoning provisions for cluster zoning and traditional subdivisions, because we also want to think about how we can restrict the development of open space there as well. That's an important objective. So I am committed to preserving our open spaces in perpetuity.
Thank you very much, John. Just directly to the question, yes, I will commit to granting the Conservators the ability to manage in the conservation restrictions. I don't need another suitable organization. They've been doing it for quite some time now. I think that they've done an excellent job, and I will make sure that that moves forward. And I'm willing to grant, obviously, those permanent conservation restrictions over all future development. We want to be clear about the parameters and have a clear plan. As Councilor Fuller mentioned, that I will agree with her in terms of having that cataloged and how we're going to move forward in doing that. I also want to be clear, though, about what we talk about in terms of future development. Does future development mean structures, or does future development mean additional open space around those, say, a soccer field or something like that? I want to make sure that we are at the table working together, and as we commit that, as we work on that plan, whether it's with planning, whether it's with law, Conservation Commission, but making sure that the conservators, if they are going to be the organization that has those restrictions, are at the table as well. I'm all about collaboration, putting people together. That is something that I have done in my job each day for the last 20 years. That is what I have done on the City Council for the last 16 years. I will ensure that we have everyone at the table to develop a clear plan with clear parameters and how we will protect our open spaces, which is so vital here in the city of Newton.
Thank you. The next question is from Green Newton. Newton is taking advantage of energy efficiency programs to reduce energy costs and save millions in our public buildings and to increase the amount of solar energy on our city property, but has not sufficiently committed to taking the savings and investing them in renewable energy programs. As Mayor of Newton, how would you support and prioritize bold solutions for long-term resource management over short-term cost? What new programs, investments, subsidies, and incentives would you propose to more efficiently conserve and more rapidly transition to renewable energy? Councilor Lynn.
Thank you, John. We are favoring long-term commitments now in favor of short-term gains to improve our environmental performance. And two excellent examples of this have been our investment in LED streetlights, which will save us millions of dollars over the next 20 years, and the design and the energy efficiencies that we've done at both Ahern and Service schools. The upfront costs can be significant, but they are more than justified by the environmental gains and financial savings in the future. I would continue to look and strengthen our investments in this way. We get about $250,000 a year from our participation in the Green Communities program, which gets reinvested in short and long-term energy saving steps, like sensors in our buildings, like that LED lighting, like better insulation and the ability to manage energy use on a real-time basis. And I will push for more investment in energy technologies that will allow us to monitor more and analyze more energy use in real time. That investment in software will give us instant information about energy so we can use that and correct problems and make adjustments, as I said, in real time. We had an example of that with Newton North a while back where the usage had spiked almost 3 times in 1 month, and we didn't know it till about 45 days later, before things had returned back to normal. We also need to look at behavioral change to help people not waste energy, such as when everyone brings their own coffee pot to work or their own electric heater or things like that. I want to make sure that we look at a behavioral change, not only within city government, but working with the schools and then educating our residents throughout. So that is something how, and I have a number of other examples that I won't go through with you, on how just starting within city government that we can help make behavioral change on what we're doing. Someone needs to set a tone at the top in the building. I will make sure that I set that tone.
Yes, we have to change from short-term focus to long-term investment, even if it means paying more now to save our planet later. There's a great mantra that I've learned that's gotten drilled into my head. Guess what? Reduce, invest, save, reinvest, incentivize, and require. I'll say it over and over again. It really makes sense. First, reduce. Remember that first word. Our first priority must be to reduce energy use. And there are measures that we can and must implement right now. And it does mean investing more, especially to renew our old buildings to a high-performance state. And as we lower energy demand, we have to expand, and yes, invest more for our clean portfolio right here in Newton and purchase more clean energy. Then moving on to invest, save, and reinvest. We have to do it, folks. We have to expand the Energy Stabilization Fund substantially by protecting efficiency-related savings as well as rebates and grants, and making sure they're used only for energy efficiency and conservation projects. And we'll continue to use the preferred vendor program when I'm mayor to leverage small projects, but here's the real rub. You've got to bundle deeper, more expensive energy retrofits with an eye towards long-term efficiency. And we have to meet those energy reduction goals that we promised to do in our Green Communities Plan. We've got to do that soon, and then we have to exceed them. I will make energy reduction a greater factor in our CIP, which really matters, by raising them as a risk factor. And I will invest as mayor in deeper assessments of our city buildings to identify the work to be done and then fund the work and get the work done. One of those words in that mantra was also require. For new city buildings, I will embrace those design and construction guidelines that were just chartered and make sure we're on the path to zero energy. And finally, I will lead. I will try to make sure that every city employee, every citizen, every child in our school understands that using building energy most efficiently is each of our responsibilities. And let's be creative about how we get the word out. We can use memos, we can use student competitions, we can use Green Newton's placemats. So I am committed to this. We're going to do this. I will help lead the way.
Next question is from the Newton Conservators. Traditionally, the city has focused its open space maintenance efforts on trails and trailheads. How would you as mayor propose to better manage Newton's open spaces? Do you support more city funding for maintenance of our open spaces? Please also address funding invasive plant removal. And we'll start with Councilor Fuller.
Thank you. I lost my identity for a moment there. As mayor, I will be committed to open space maintenance because preservation does not end with the purchase or acquisition of a property. I know that for people to enjoy our open space, they have to be maintained. And for their ecology to thrive, invasive species have to be controlled. And as mayor, I am committed to increasing the very modest amount we appropriate right now to address these concerns. I happen to live near Webster Woods, and so I've walked there frequently. The marked trails there are trees across them right now. And sometimes, I know the paths really well, but if you didn't, you might get lost. I'm also particularly mindful of accessibility, and yes, Robert, I see you right there in the aisle. We have to make sure that some parts of most of our places are accessible. Invasives, boy, they are all over Newton. One example in Cold Spring Park, which is recently we've learned is our oldest forested area in Newton. We are battling invasive plants. The buckthorn that's coming up, we're going to lose the ecosystem surrounding it if it isn't controlled. And there's a terrific pilot going on trying to get the red maples to reseed. But it will be a shame if we lose that forest. It's terrific that our tree warden, Mark Welsh, does come in with a tree crew and help with removal of invasive trees. Example of black locust over at Woodcock Meadow. And I'm so grateful to the many volunteers who are pulling invasives. I've got to give a shout out to Catherine Howard. And yes, thankfully the The city does come and pick up the bags that the volunteers push all the invasives into. I am increasingly convinced, though, that volunteers alone can't do this all. There's just too much. So I'm committed to making sure our city steps forward and helps. I see that we only have 30 seconds left, so I'm going to go really fast. We have to invest more. We've got 1,000 acres of open space and conservation land, and we're only spending $50,000 a year for capital improvements, special projects, and annual maintenance. We have to increase the budget. With that, I'm just going to add one last thing. We're talking about land. Don't forget, much of this land abuts water properties. So, in the whole water, sewer, stormwater system, of which I've spent years doing plans for, we have to make sure that the sewage isn't leaking out. So, continuing that important work on sewer, stormwater is essential to also making sure we maintain our open space.
The City of Newton has not invested enough funding or resources to properly maintain our open spaces. One of the core areas of concentration that I have talked about over the course of this campaign, when I go out and talk to people about education, infrastructure, communication, all the things that are important here in the City of Newton, I talk about one other thing: quality of life city services. And what do I mean by that? I believe that our core city services are doing relatively well here in the city, but our quality of life city services, areas like parks and recreation, senior services, others that our environment, other quality of life city services that touch each and every one of us every day, are areas where we could use improvement. Mayor Warren talked about when he came into office, he wanted to do 3 things. He wanted to work on transparency, accountability, and getting his fiscal house in order. I feel I've been instrumental in working with him on those things over the last 8 years as president of the City Council, but now I believe it's time to invest in those quality of life city services. And I will be looking at this specifically within my first term to have a real strategic plan on what we're doing in terms of how we will preserve those open spaces, how will we invest more money, because I am tired as a parent, as a counselor, as president of the council, going to our different parks and areas and seeing where the PTOs have invested monies into playground structures, and where the leagues that we depend on so much have invested monies into our fields, and everything else in between there that is the responsibility of the city looks tired and needs improvement. We will develop a plan to do that, and if this is something that I am committed to and looking at as a priority here in the City of Newton, I will invest that money. I think it's also very important to continue our excellent working relationships with many of the friends, organizations, and volunteer groups that give up so much of their time and their personal investment into our community. And we want to make sure that we are working collaboratively to ensure we're taking care of all this precious open space. I stand ready to come up with the ability to have more funding, take that strategic plan, put those into our capital improvement plan and move forward. In terms of the invasive plant removal, I will work really hard, very hard with our environmental groups here in the city on a strategic plan for that invasive plant removal. Active, not very active, we have to come up with a strategic approach. If we're going to invest money to help do that, we need to figure out where we're going and how we do it. I would do it at the table with those groups. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question comes from Green Newton. Newton has more than 500 unrepaired gas leaks that are a significant source of methane gas emissions, which creates air pollution, explosion risks, and damage to our trees. As ratepayers, do we want to invest billions to replace older corroded gas lines, or should we commit to alternative clean energy options to heat our buildings? As mayor of Newton, as part of solving this huge gas leak challenge, how would you resolve this dilemma, and what opportunities do you see for transitioning to alternative clean energy to heat our homes and businesses?
Thank you, John. According to recent reports, 50% of methane, 80 times more powerful than carbon as a greenhouse gas, is coming from 7% of the leaks. These super emitters, so it makes sense from an environmental perspective to use some of our maintenance funds to help couple with the monies that we are getting in working with groups to fix these. This is a serious issue, folks. This is something that the city is going to need to step up and work with regard to utility companies. We need to build on our efforts that we've already started in coordinating leak repair with National Grid, so our DPW isn't continuously repairing a street as part of our roads plan, and then we understand that the utility company is coming in the next year to fix the gas main. We have started that coordination with utility companies. We are sharing master plans right now, and that has to continue. Ratepayers have been paying about 3% more on their bills for years. And for those gas leaks that are going into our atmosphere and are harming and contributing to global warming. We estimate that Newton's gas leaks are responsible for almost 22% of the city's global warming footprint, and we are paying for this, and this is outrageous. Other states where the gas companies are paying for the lost gas, leaks get cleaned up almost 50% faster. I support legislation to require independent public health assessments of any proposed new pipe gas lines, gas pipelines, because these do affect us. They are part of our rates. Last year, Mayor Warren led a successful effort by mayors and cities and towns to be exempt from losing solar credit values. Mayors are more powerful when they work together. I would help to continue to be a voice on this issue. I would definitely push for state legislation that would stop Grid from charging consumers for the price of lost gas. As I mentioned in other states, it's doubled the rate of repair. We need to get away from gas as soon as practicable in our car, electrify our cars, our homes, and our businesses. And one of the promising technology that I would push for as mayor as we look at our entire energy plan is air source heat pumps that provide heat and cooling and all electric and are far more efficient. Thank you.
Mothers out front have this exactly right. Gas leaks speed up climate change, cause explosions, harm our health, cost us money, and kill our trees. Methane is 87 times more destructive to the atmosphere than carbon dioxide. I'm going to repeat that. It is mind-blowing. Methane is 87 more times destructive to the atmosphere than carbon dioxide. So we can't just focus on dangerous or explosive leaks. We have to look at all leaks and especially start super emitters. So step one in the question was fixing the leaks. We have to fix them, we have to fix them now. And I've done a lot of work on this already. Remember all that water, sewer, stormwater work? All those pipes I've already understood? No, the city can't touch the gas system's pipes. But our job is to persistently coordinate with them and make sure our accelerated roads program is coordinated with it. I will do that. And I'm so grateful to the gas leak activists that have convinced the major gas companies to expand infrastructure repairs to target those super emitters. This is a great step forward, and as mayor, I'll make sure our city is part of it. I'll also work hard as an advocate to pressure the gas companies to address these known gas leaks with better testing standards and broadening the range of and expediting gas leaks that they pursue. And I will advocate with our state reps to the governor to improve the coordination and efficiency of our efforts and to pressure the gas companies to do more. Second part, we have to reduce our reliance on gas. We have to accelerate our shift to all electric and clean energy. That energy action plan will specify how we get that work done. Remember that mantra, I talked about it earlier? Reduce, invest, save, reinvest, incentivize, and require. Remember that first word again, reduce. Let's be sure to stop there. We all must more aggressively reduce energy wasted and energy used. So yes, we got to promote alternative heat sources like heat pumps, coupled with enhanced weatherization. We have to use geothermal and ground source heat pumps in our municipal projects and encourage renewables and incentivize private investment in renewables.
Next question from the Newton Conservators. As mayor, what criteria would you use in deciding what are appropriate sites for photovoltaic panels in Newton? Would you support putting solar panels in parks or conservation areas? Would you support panels on sites that have the potential to be preserved as conservation or parkland?
As mayor, I will be committed to both expanding our solar PV panels and protecting our existing as well as our targeted priority parks and open spaces. I treasure our open space and our tree canopy, and I'm committed to making us 100% renewable. Right now, we do have a really strong open space plan, and thank goodness it identifies the key parcels that we need to protect and that have to be excluded from solar PV arrays. But we've got, remember my background in planning? One of the things I've learned with plans is they can't be static, they can't sit up on the shelf. So that open space plan, we've got to make it more dynamic by updating it annually or biennially, if I pronounce that correctly, to make sure that key parcels keep being protected and protected from solar PV arrays. One of the questions there was, so how do you figure out where to put all these solar panels? I will look first to install them in locations that don't require any loss of trees, and then only if at sites where the impact on the trees could be minimized with special attention to significant trees, whether it's by size or by type. What we need to do instead, we can't look at our open space in those special key targeted areas for open space. We have to instead, for our solar PVs, they have to be integrated carefully and deliberatively in our built environment, on rooftops and parking canopies, on public buildings, as well as those that are owned by nonprofits and private landowners. Did you see that Newton Wellesley is just finally putting up their solar array on their parking garage? But I'm going to repeat it again. We can't put these arrays in our forested areas or our parks. I, though, am acutely aware that we don't have enough parking lots or rooftops to supply with solar PV the energy we use right now, much less than what we'll need when we convert to all electricity in the future. Thankfully, technology is advancing, so maybe this gets easier. But in the meantime, let's be innovative. Let's figure out how to line the Mass Pike with solar panels, just like Sweden does. Let's partner with and then move aggressively to actually require commercial and nonprofit rooftops to be solar ready. And I have to end there. I had 2 more paragraphs.
Well, I'll be brief, so if you want to use my time to use your other 2 paragraphs, that's fine. But and I would love to do the Mass Pike too, but unfortunately the Mass Pike is not ours, so that's going to be a difficult sell. But installing solar requires collaboration among all parties that could be affected. The landowner, as well as the abutters, and how much that location will benefit all. I also do not want to pit advocacy groups against one another that was potentially happening with the library. We also have to think creatively about locations. That is very, very important. Perhaps, as someone who was at Newton North last night at their football game, we look at areas over the bleachers, out there and in other areas throughout the city. We need to be creative and we need to be collaborative. Partnering with business owners, creating incentives and cost shares to encourage them to install solar roofs is another option that we should consider looking at. I am not in favor of installing solar panels in our parks or in our conservation areas other than having a real strong conversation of the parking areas and only other areas that may be appropriate, as I mentioned, like over places where people are actually sitting. Our parks and conservation areas should be preserved in their natural condition without these solar installations. Thank you.
Next question from Green Newton. In 2016, Newton City Council passed a budget resolution requesting that the DPW develop a long-range plan to improve the city's recycling rate and reduce trash tonnage. This included a, quote, zero waste strategy to reduce consumption, encourage reuse of materials, and maximize recycling. As Mayor of Newton, would you support an organics food waste diversion program, increase recycling services to apartment complexes and condos, and institute ordinances such as pay as you throw?
So yes, reduce, reuse, and recycle. We do need to raise our overall recycling rates towards a goal of 100% diversion from landfills and incinerators. This is a win for the environment and for our budget. For every $45 of additional ton of waste we don't throw away or divert to recycling is a benefit for the city. So we need more waste prevention programs and more recycling. Newton spent almost $8 million on waste disposal services in the last year or two, and which goes directly into our tax rates. You asked me about supporting an organics and food waste diversion program. Absolutely. And we've already started to begin that pilot. I co-doctored that along with my colleagues in PF, and that will hopefully be implemented by March of 2018. Getting this waste out of our waste stream will impact on savings and the environment. Once we digest those results, no pun intended, we need to see what works and what didn't work and how it could be implemented citywide. Understanding overall costs, paybacks, and clearly developing a plan to implement this through the city is vitally important, and we need to have a very strategic rollout, just like we did for the single-stream recycling and the trash. You asked me about increasing recycling services to apartment complexes. Was that part of that question? Sorry, I'm looking at something different. It was. Sorry. Ruth Ann and I have been looking at a lot of notes over the last 10 months, folks. So, yes, that will definitely be something that I would review. We have almost 100 apartment complexes and condos throughout the city. And in theory, I would support that expansion. But actually, we had paid $15 a ton last year for recycling, and recycling rates are not what they used to be. Many of the apartments and complexes right now that are doing their own private pickup were done at the time of their special permit. So we would have to go back and look at their conditions and work with them to ensure that we're not burdening for the city after something that we had done with their special permit. Instituting an ordinance such as pay as you throw, is something that I would put on the table to work with the Solid Waste Commission on. I think that is an important initiative to look at the pros and the cons of that. That is something that I would commit to looking at, but I would not commit to implementing the program, but I would want to put all the parameters on the table to understand it better. Thank you.
So let's go back to the mantra one more time. You're all going to have it memorized by the time you walk out. Reduce, invest, save, reinvest, incentivize, and require. First word again is reduce. The key in the long run is for us to think really big here in Newton and to think about how we reduce consumption in general. We in Newton consume a lot, but we were at an arts and culture forum just a couple of nights ago, and we were telling our husbands and wives about that, but that we spend a lot of time together. What we really want to keep doing in Newton is shifting in general our whole city to consuming less material goods and investing in more experiential experiences here, and that's a lot about arts and culture. So that's the big, big picture. On the more direct picture, we do need to reduce waste by increasing recycling and reuse and diverting organics. And Scott had it right, the numbers are right. If we reduce the waste stream, we can reduce that $8 million investment that we have right now. It also conserves resources, reduces the needs for landfills and incinerators, and reduces the energy cost in the production of goods. Our goal must be zero waste. And again, we're being set up really well as the next mayor. We have ongoing excellent work from a new terrific department leadership in our sustainable materials management, and I pledge to support existing and expanding efforts, including the necessity of expanding the staff as needed to implement assertive interim steps. And you know, the long-range plan that's underway, it's really going to be terrific. And I'll properly staff the department and the Solid Waste Commission. We have an interesting opportunity coming up. The solid waste contract comes up in 2020. That's exactly the time to look at expanding recycling to apartments and to nonprofits. Piloting our curbside food waste, great that we've got the pilot going. I'm committed to rolling it out citywide. I am open to increasing recycling with pay-as-you-throw. You remember back in the Citizen Advisory Group days, I was vice that. We were pushing for that back in 2008. There's also another thing that we can do in the interim, though. We can incentivize our residents to actually use the smaller carts. It will be in our self-interest if we actually pay people to take smaller carts. Let's look at that. Swap shops we should be thinking about as another way to divert and reduce waste. And I'll just end on one last thing. The need for outreach and education. It is so essential. We're doing it better, but we have to do more and more and more. Thank you.
Thank you. This is the final question, and it comes from the Newton Conservators. The 3 private golf courses in Newton occupy land that serves as one type of unprotected open space. This land is all getting the benefit of reduced property taxes under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 61B, in exchange for offering the city the right of first refusal if the owner chooses to sell or convert any of this land to another use. How would you respond to such an opportunity, understanding that the city would have to match the price of a bona fide purchase and sale agreement?
If people's eyes aren't glazing over now, and to remember where we started way back almost an hour and a half ago with Webster Woods, keep those answers in mind as we think about the golf course. It's exactly the same thing. As mayor, I'm committed to moving swiftly to acquire any special open space, including a golf course or a portion of golf course that becomes available. I was doing a little research for this forum. Our 3 large private golf courses, they account for 56% of the privately held open space in the city. Isn't that amazing? And 23% of all our open space. And thank goodness we have the right of first refusal for all 3 of them. And if they become available, we have to pounce on them. And what would be really interesting for us to strategize on, though, is so if we get the golf courses, what do we do with them? It doesn't necessarily all have to be passive recreation. We do need parks and recreation space here. And I can also imagine that we would use some portion of them for affordable housing to subsidize the purchase. That's what we did with the Newton Commonwealth Golf Course. Thank you, Alderman, City Councilor Lyle Baker. So there's exciting possibilities there. You guys know that financial expertise is in my wheelhouse. I'm committed to making sure that we keep some of our bonding capacity available for these opportunistic purchases. But what I'd really like to do is get out front and be proactive. If you're doing this on the spur, when all of a sudden you're just finding out some golf courses can become available, it's so much harder. So let's plan ahead. Let's start talking to the golf courses, stay in touch with them, see if they're even contemplating this, involve our stakeholders in thinking about what we might imagine doing with the golf courses, and again, be proactive and be nimble and look to acquire open space, including a golf course.
We need to be extremely clear about what we would do with a golf course if offered. That is one thing that I think we need to have as a start. Just like we did when we had the Aquinas opportunity, we went out to the taxpayers to tell them why we were expediting a bond authorization through the city council, because you had to have a plan. If we want to start talking now about that, we need to put out what that plan would look like. We need to start talking with stakeholders. Utilizing Councilor Fuller's percentages, those are some big open space areas within our city. If we are going to try to match a bona fide purchase and sale agreement, that is going to be an extremely expensive proposition for the city. Not that I'm not willing to undertake that, but you also have the probability that that may not fit within our current debt capacity. So we have to talk about what we would be doing with that. If you're going to be a leader and you're going to go out and talk about executing something like that, you have to have something in mind that you're going to go out and talk to the taxpayers about. So I believe that the first thing you need to do is, if we're even going to consider this, is to put a clear plan together. And I'll use that Aquinas example, because when we went out to get Aquinas, we had a plan of how that was going to fit in to the big picture here in the city of Newton. So I just want to make sure that if we have that plan and we are going to try to match that, we will probably have to partner with either private organizations or other individuals who are willing to negotiate with the city. Because doing it together, I believe we can accomplish great things. But I just want to be clear, that will be a very expensive proposition for the city that we will have to properly plan for.
Thank you both very much. We really appreciate you coming. Let's have a round of applause for the candidates. Okay, now we're going to take some questions from the audience. And we have a second.
While we're waiting for this part, there are drinks back there that arrived while we've been talking, and there are cookies. So please go help yourselves as we're chatting.
The gentleman in the...
My name is Frank Backman. I'm with the Crystal Lake Conservancy. I'm the board of directors of the Conservancy. Just protect and preserve Crystal Lake as a vital recreational and environmental resource in the community. And my question is, what are your plans for protecting the health of the lake, specifically addressing runoff storm drain filtration, invasive species, and I think very important, the erosion of the common and levees of the coast. And maybe secondly, how would you envision integrating the lake into the environmental and recreational plans for the city?
Thank you. Let's start with Councilor Fuller.
Great question about Crystal Lake, because it's an extraordinary part of the city of Newton. And I'm sure almost all of us have been in that lake many times. We do have to protect and preserve it. So I live over in Ward 7 and have been deeply involved for years with the eutrophication of Hammond Pond. So I've been living this in my backyard, and I know how you've been living this in your backyard. There's much to do. To slow the eutrophication and maintain the water quality, making sure that the phosphorus doesn't get into the water in the first place, it is an ongoing, repetitive process of educating all the residents who are living in that area. Changing behavior is hard. You have to first convince somebody that they want to do it, and then convince them to actually change their behavior on an ongoing basis. We have to maintain the storm drains and actually invest probably in more of them. You asked about the shoreline erosion. It's clear to me on the terrace at Livingston Cove, we have to get some terraces in there. We also have, I'm not sure if you mentioned it or not, you may have said it, we've got an issue with invasive species also around Crystal Lake. So we've been depending really on volunteers to do the work. We're going to have to step that up, and I think the city's going to have to also take responsibility for it. And you're right, Crystal Lake, too often we're kind of talking about it independently. We have to be thinking both about it in terms of our recreation plan and our environmental plan. It's got to get integrated into both. And sometimes, let's talk straight here, there's a little bit of a tension between active recreation and preserving the lake, and finding that fine line of making sure it's open and accessible to swimmers and people who enjoy it, but making sure it's still safe and protected going forward. That's a hard one. I'm willing and committed to wading into that and making sure that I have the conversations about this, but also leading on it and moving this forward.
Thank you.
Did anybody catch that wading into that? I caught that. No one chuckled, Ruth Ann, but I did hear that. So I want to just go backwards because I appreciate the opportunity to weigh in a little bit on that. But I do want to pick up on one word that Councilor Fuller talked about, was the tension of the use of the coves. Seeing what is happening at the two coves right now, try to put myself in the position of the people that live there. And there's a lot of activity there. I believe that there's a lot of activity there that it wasn't really intended for. And that's something that I think that we need to work collaboratively together on how to address that. The usage of Crystal Lake in terms of the water quality, and I do understand that the Parks and Recreation Commission, the Conservancy, are working together on how to improve the quality of the water by utilizing the process by which they bring more air up from the bottom, which is vitally important. They're looking at they're looking at plantings, they're looking at a couple of unique techniques on how to do that with portable stations that will go around and bring that to the top to improve the water quality. Yes, the need to keep the phosphorus. I've learned more about phosphorus in the last summer than I'm willing to admit, but having to ensure that the Conservancy, that the city, that we continue to work together to ensure that we reduce those levels, work on the system to ensure that we're not increasing those levels is very important. And the terracing of the Livingston Cove is something that I know is very important in order to do that. I do not believe that the grant money, it was a grant that we had gotten to do this, will not be enough to finish the project. And because of its importance, I would be willing to invest the remaining amount of the money because it's an important factor for the overall health of Crystal Lake.
Hi, Robert Solomon. It's funny that we're sitting together because my first question was about that. Say, this is a three-part question, and I don't get to all of these, so I hope you'll just bear with me. First of all, my son and I often talk about Crystal Lake. My son is a world-renowned limnologist, and he asks me all the time. He lives in New York now, and he works for an environment think tank there. And he keeps asking me what's being done about the lake, because each time he comes into town, the lake doesn't look very healthy. So with this gentleman next to me, yeah, we're really concerned about the health of the lake and want to know when something's going to be done. When you're going to bring in some specialists to really take care of that lake. The second question has something to do with environment because it has to do with transportation. And that is, over the past few years, while myself and some other people in Newton Highlands have been trying to get the Newton Highlands T-station rebuilt, we haven't had much support from the city of Newton. And I'd like to know what kind of support we can expect, because we're now stuck at 30% design. We had projected that we were going to be finished with that station by the end of 2018. And now we're stuck because there are problems with system-wide transportation. There's a gas line that goes across the bridge, which is interfering with whether we're going to be able to put a ramp on the Walnut Street side. But the whole fact that the city of Newton has not stood behind myself and these other people has been a problem.
So Robert, I'll try to work on the transportation piece. I'd be happy to talk about the Housing Authority at some point in time with you offline. In terms of the transportation piece, yes, I think you need a mayor who is going to be working very collaboratively with our state delegation. The experience that we have in our state delegation, not only with regard to the advocacy for the Highlands T-stop, but for all the T-stops throughout Newton, I think it would be someone I would look forward to working with them on that, and as a unified voice going to the state DOT to understand ridership and need. I think that's one of the things that we're having a problem with here in the city, is not doing a good enough job of explaining to the DOT why and what the need is. If you look at the two areas that we're building out in Newtonville with Austin Street and Washington Place, explaining to them why they need to upgrade that particular area, because we're building ridership. For someone like yourself, where there are people in that area that have that need, a better, more unified voice is better to go work together with the state on that. At the end of the day, as you mentioned, it probably comes down to an issue of money. Do we start to look at partnerships on how we could work together with businesses in the area or others, and how we could get that done and partner with the state? My experience has been through the capital improvement plan that if there are other monies to leverage certain projects, they do make their way up the capital improvement plan of the city. So that's something I would consider talking about. In terms of the health and the testing of the water with regard to hiring specialists, I know we are continuously testing the water there. We should be looking at aggressively the approaches that we talked about with regard to the water quality initiatives that we're talking about. If it's not getting to the point where we believe that something like that is getting better, or we're not showing marked improvement, it would absolutely be a priority of mine to bring someone in to protect that open space gem that we have here in the city.
Transportation is absolutely an environmental issue, so it's great that you brought this forward. You used the words, you wanted a mayor who would stand behind you. I will actually be a mayor who will lead from in front. This, I'm grateful to you and the other advocates, citizen activists who have been taking the lead on this. You should have had the mayor standing in front of you as you did this work. And yes, our state delegation will be invaluable. And that close relationship I will have with Cindy and Kay and Ruth going forward. We do have to advocate both to the DOT and to the governor. The governor plays a big part here. There's also, you happen to be focusing on a particular station on the Green Line. We've got this issue both on the commuter rail and on the Green Line, and accessibility matters. It matters for you, given your particular circumstances, but it matters for the able-bodied as well. We have to make these accessible. I want to add one more thing that's been troubling me. We've had some developments already been permitted in the Newtonville area. And we keep saying over and over again how important it is to make the Green Line, the commuter rail, more accessible. But we have not forced any of those developers to put money into a fund so that we can, I'm convinced with the economic problems the MBTA is facing, that to really move this forward, we're going to need not just state funding, but also developer monies, and I'm pretty convinced we're going to need city funding. It's going to take all three to really get this work done. Otherwise, Newton's going to keep being at the bottom of the list. Crystal Lake and the quality of the water. Again, we're just such an amazing city. We have passionate experts who love Crystal Lake, who are going out and doing the water testing. One could argue that that's the city's responsibility, but here we have passionate volunteers who are doing it. I'm grateful for it, but again, should the city be stepping up and be doing that testing? Probably.
Okay, we have time for one more question.
My name's Karen Bray, and you both have been talking a lot about quality of life here tonight, and especially you, Scott, mentioned those three words, quality of life, and many Newton residents, especially in our group, Newton Calm, which means Citizens Against Leaf Blower Mania, have been asking for, and we've explained over and over about how leaf blowers decrease our quality of life and how they are bad for the environment. And I'm wondering if you would both be willing to commit to a ban on all leaf blowers, at least in the summertime when the leaves are still on the trees and leaf blowers are just blowing around dust. And what ideas do you have for enforcing our current ordinance, which we, 1,000 residents who signed our petition for regulations are very pleased to have at least this step in this ordinance that we have now, which is one beginning step. So how would you enforce that in a concrete way? Thank you.
I'll work backwards on the enforcement piece. I think we do need to do a better job of enforcement. I know that the police have been very backlogged with their approach to enforcement. We may need to look at not only police, but possibly inspectional services or some other mechanism on trying to do that. The police right now, by law, by ordinance, have that enforcement under Chapter 20 of our ordinances, but it may be time to have the conversation to look at that. The other thing that we've talked about, Karen, that might help if it does just stay with the police is around better education of homeowners. We had talked briefly about that. We are getting complaints now with regard to the landscape or the leaf blowers happening. We dispatch the police. They go out and they're riding around looking for the landscape company. My thought was maybe approach the homeowner where they were coming from. Talk to them. Maybe they're not even aware of the regulations that we have in place. It needs to be a better collaborative educational approach to this. In terms of a ban, I am hesitant on a ban. I just want to be upfront with you. I thought that the compromise legislation that I supported, that we put in place, it has been effective. I've heard from many people out knocking doors that their quality of life in terms of noise has gotten somewhat better. But I think the education, I have a landscape company myself, and I asked them to use the smaller handheld. They had no problem doing that. So that is something that I will continue to look at, more on the education, the enforcement, how we can work together, and how we can make the quality of life for residents here in Newton even better.
I could just say ditto, as I think Scott said it pretty well, but let me be a little more specific. On the enforcement, first off, we rolled it out badly. We did insufficient amount of information to both the homeowners and to the landscapers. And I don't think we've caught up yet, so that whole education and outreach program needs to improve. I'm increasingly convinced that we need to have a code enforcement officer or agent on this. I think, I don't think it's necessarily going to work with the police. Let's do some more work and figure it out, but I'm thinking a code enforcement agent. I'm also convinced, as Scott said, that we may need the notices and the fines to go to the homeowner. That's going to be the real way forward on this. When the homeowner gets the fine, that's going to start changing their relationship with their landscapers. On a ban, I'm not ready to go for a ban in the summer, but what I'm committed to is it's increasingly clear to me that leaf blowers are more than just a noise nuisance. The more I learn and the more I read, that airborne particulate matter really is a health hazard, coupled with that small engines are really very polluting. So we're going to have to keep re-examining the ordinance. I'm not ready to do it right now.
Sorry. It's been a little tough, as you know, getting it to where we are right now.
I'll just add one last thing. I think we actually need to talk to our surrounding neighbors. I think we're going to be much better off if we can coordinate with our neighbors and have a regional approach to this so that the landscapers have consistent rules. And I think doing that will help the landscapers and help Newton.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Scott Lennon and Ruth Ann Fuller. Raise your hand if you think that these two candidates have given us hope that come January, we will have a mayor who will work with us on these urgent environmental issues. I'm sorry we couldn't take additional questions because we promised them that we would wrap up by 6 p.m. sharp, and we will go over by a couple of minutes. I'm Marcia Cooper, president of Green Newton. I'd also like to thank everyone here for coming tonight to this program on a Saturday afternoon. We know that you all understand the urgency of these environmental issues. And many of you have already been engaged in the work of Newton Conservators, Beth Wilkinson, thank you, and Green Newton, as well as other environmental groups in Newton. We all have more questions. We all have more passions about these issues. If you are not already participating with our groups, we welcome you to participate. We have information in the back. Please, please visit our websites. We are working closely with city leaders, and we have wonderful city leaders, wonderful city councilors who get it. New candidates. As a matter of fact, on Green Newton's website, please visit it. We have the city councilors answering a questionnaire that's been given to them. We don't have a special program for them, but you can find out the answers. Who has solutions for our environmental problems? Okay, so we need you to work with us. I thank LaSalle College has done a lot to support our work. We have Armando in the front working as a student with Green Newton this semester. They've donated cookies, they've provided this space very kindly, and filming, we have Lauren over there. John Ragosin, we thank you for moderating this forum. You did a great job. And let's see if I'm forgetting it. We all want you to be informed voters. We want you to understand these issues. Understand a new lively topic is going to be Newton Power Choice. We're going to be helping to educate the community about it. Please pay attention to it. Understand it. Talk to your friends about it. We can do so much more, and it is so important on the local level to be doing this work. It is very, very important. This is the first environmental forum that we've had solely on this issue in the history of Newton. We need a lot more. This is a highly important, urgent issue that is not being addressed on a national level. We need each and every one of you. So please sign up. You can sign up in the back, pay attention, join our groups, look at our websites, and do everything you can as your time allows to support our work. Thank you so much for being here.